to be able to just make a choice on your own and just be able to speak for yourself.
This one's wife. Has anyone checked on the kids? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. This one's wife and Harry are living it up in Whistler. Nice 3-day trip. Somebody else's private jet has taken them there. This one's wife is undertaking a usual fashion show, sporting cream and white on her first day, and then navy and black on her second day. I wonder what the third day will bring. I'm not really that bothered, but I'm sure we'll get to see, because she will ensure that she appears in numerous photographs, which the world's press will then beam around the world, all part of the provision of fuel to her. We get to stay in a nice hotel, purportedly costing $8,000 a night, eat out at a posh restaurant, and she can subject people to her fridge magnet platitudes and boring beige word salads. Not a bad life, and not a bad job if you can get it. Using other people's money for the purpose of apparently supporting a charitable endeavour, though in actual fact, we all know it's about her. And indeed, so much is it about her, Archie and Lilibet, the 2 children she apparently has, are nowhere to be seen again. I'm sure Archie would rather enjoy being on the ski slope. For instance, you find a Norwegian, they're born with skis, and from a very early age, they're out on the ski slopes, ensuring that they're starting to learn to continue the tradition of being the most successful nation at the Winter Olympics. Young kids out there, ensuring that they are learning to ski. They very much enjoy it. If they're not doing that, then it might be the case that he just wants to be on a sledge and careering downhill, or having a go at some of the other activities like his father has done so. He's 4 years old, isn't he? A boisterous little boy that wants to get stuck into these activities, and it'd be a lovely environment for him to find himself involved in. Bring the nanny. She can keep an eye on him and Lilibet, allowing this one's wife to go around interrupting handshakes and ensuring that she stares down the camera lens. But of course, they're not there, are they? In the course of less than a year, and this is just off the top of my head, and you may be able to think of other instances beyond the ones that I can, this one's wife has been in New York twice without the children. Back in May, there was the preposterous car chase that never was, the near-catastrophic car chase. In fact, let's bring out the horn of ridicule. Really needs it, doesn't it? We didn't have the horn of ridicule at the time, but let's give it a quick blast now. There we are, that's better. And in New York in November, as she explained that being a mother is one of the most important things to her, so much so she needs to rub it in for people who've recently lost their own children, and, of course, demonstrate that she loves being a mother so much, she repeatedly goes away without her children. So there were 2 trips to New York. She then went to Canoeing in the Caribbean to spend some time with her and Harry without the kids. There was the trip to Dusseldorf at the This One's Wife Games last September, where she appeared without the kids. And on the way back, so desperate to get back and make them milkshakes and tuck them in, she stopped off in Portugal without the kids. And then just recently cleared off to Jamaica to ensure that she could go there without the kids, flying on a private jet again. Trip to Vegas without the kids, and just recently an attendance in Canada. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 8 trips, isn't it? About 8 trips in the course of the last year. It's getting on for once a month, a few days away from the children. And there may be other instances that we don't hear about. So for somebody, of course, that holds herself out as finding motherhood so important, she spends an awful lot of time away from the children in circumstances where she doesn't actually need to. One can readily understand that there are certain occupations, for instance, the armed forces being the most obvious one, that you need to be away from your children. Discharging your obligations in the defence of a country or a realm means that you can't always have your children with you. Sure, they might live on a base with you, but when you're out on manoeuvres, and particularly when you're in the theatre of battle, there's no way that that can happen, and therefore that would be understandable. If you're away in the Navy, you're not going to be able to have your family around you when you're out on manoeuvres on a ship. That makes perfect sense. There are other individuals who will have the occasional business trip. They might perhaps be a travelling salesperson, and therefore that means that they're back and forth, possibly spending a couple of nights away each week from their family. But that's because their job necessitates it. This one's wife, of course, would argue that it's necessary for her to do these things. Well, it's not really necessary for her to purchase an award and then fabricate a car chase in New York and be away from the children. And the whole point of having children, I understand, is to spend some time with them. And therefore, if you're going on holiday to Canoean or Portugal, why don't you take the children with you? At the Dusseldorf Games, they were there for a number of days. Why not take the children with you? After all, you've got the money to be able to afford to take them with you in terms of travel and flight costs and accommodation costs. And of course, you'll only charge it to the relevant organisation or charity anyway. And furthermore, you employ nannies. So it's not like you're going to actually have to do too much parenting anyway. So it'll enable you to focus on getting your rictus grin right, allowing you to select the appropriately oversized clothing to swan around in, and enable you to practice diving into other people's handshakes. You can do all of that unaffected by the demands of your children. Thus, the children get left behind, and there's no reason why they ought to. They could have gone on the private jet to Canada as well, and as I mentioned earlier on, I'm fairly certain Archie would probably enjoy the experience of being on the slopes as a rumbustious young man. But this one's wife won't do it. Why? Well, first of all, the children would then place demands upon her, and with no emotional empathy, her narcissism, going to say, does not compute. True, she could palm them off on the nanny, but of course that doesn't really fit with the optics if the children are seen with the nanny all of the time on the slopes rather than her. She doesn't want to play with them because she finds that boring, because it's about them and not her. She wants to be able to lap up all of the attention on the slopes, ensuring that there isn't a kid clamouring for attention, getting in the way, putting a sticky ice lolly on her shoulder or whatever. As was mentioned in my earlier video, Stop Holding Hands, the author there identified that if ordinarily you have children, they tend to stop you holding hands because you're dealing with them. That doesn't apply to this one's wife because she never deals with them. Accordingly, she doesn't want them there because she doesn't care about them, and they are an inconvenience. There's also the possibility that has been mooted that they either don't look or behave in the way that she would prefer, that they're actually some form of letdown to her, which is why she hides them. And of course, there is the old perennial favourite, which is simply they don't actually exist, which is hence why they don't come to these events. And as certain people have suggested, that there are child models or child actors that have been used instead on the appearances that have taken place. Whilst that's a possibility, one sees it as less likely, and more simpler explanation is this: that their children do exist, but she doesn't want anything to do with them because it detracts the attention from her, that it places a demand on her to do something when she'd rather not, and it causes people to be distracted from looking at her, and because she's such a selfish, self-absorbed individual, it's far easier just to leave the children at home with somebody else so that she can focus on swanning around drinking up all the fuel. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.